Good morning, everybody. Dr. Vasquez here. Over the past 2 days, today being the third day, referencing the previous 2 days, over the past previous 2 days, I recorded 2 videos that you may never see. And so what I'm going to do right now is provide a summary of those videos and a complete explanation of what I talked about, and also why that may be important to you. So for those of you who have been following my video blogs, obviously I talk about medicine and nutrition and research and corruption and all that kind of stuff. And then sometimes I just talk about life in general, whether it's food or music or architecture or business. And I don't try to put myself out there as some, business guru or whatever, but I have had several businesses. And as I said in one of my recent videos, everyone is a business. You have to make money to survive in this world. In order to make that money, you have to provide a product or a service. You receive money and you invest that money. You buy food, you pay the rent, you pay for your mortgage, you buy stuff. And sometimes those things that you buy typically devalue. And sometimes they acquire more value with time, especially real estate. So everyone is a business. And so when I talk about, things related to business, like I said, I'm not trying to be, Grant Cardone or any of those guys. I wouldn't want to be any of those guys. I'm happy with the life that I have, and yeah, I have to do some business things. Whether that's doing these video courses on whatever topic, or doing other things to make or keep money. I mean, like I said, everybody's a business. I'm a business. You're a business. And in the course of doing business, we have to hire people sometimes. You pretty much always have to hire someone unless you have a really simple structure. But at any level of, advanced structure whatsoever, you have to hire attorneys and you have to hire consultants. And if you're going to live internationally, you have to have attorneys in different countries and all that kind of stuff. You should anyway, because you're going to sign contracts, you're going to buy stuff, you're going to rent houses, and you need to have somebody local who knows the language and who knows the culture and who can, help you out. So anyway, that's my kind of introduction to the whole concept of talking about business-related issues. Plus, related more to health. Health isn't just exercising and eating well and taking vitamins, In order to be, more completely healthy, we have to manage our lives successfully. And that includes, again, managing finances, because you can take all the vitamins you want, you can sleep 8 hours, you can have a good bowel movement every morning, but if you're stressed out because your boss is abusive and you can't leave your job and you're broke all the time and you can't pay the rent and you got people hassling you or abusing you or whatever, all that other external stuff like going to the gym and doing Pilates and, being flexible in your yoga class is going to become less relevant if you're stressed out because of business and finances. So again, I recorded 2 videos, both of them about 1 hour each, the day previous. And then because this drama keeps continuing, I recorded another spontaneous video last night as I was in the process of dealing with someone who I have hired to do a job. And I never knew this guy really well. As I've mentioned before, he succeeded on 2 jobs. He failed on one that wasn't of much importance. And then he completely, as we say in the vernacular, he completely fucked up another job. And that's been an ongoing source of frustration for me. So we have finally come to the end of that road. And that road ended on a bridge, which I have now completely burned. But apparently burning the bridge wasn't enough, because he still wanted to flap his fucking jaw. And so then I had to just call in the airstrike. And that's what I did last night. So as I've said, and I studied this, I studied my own approach, and obviously I've studied other works, but I was rather meticulous in my approach to dealing with this guy, because my intention with him isn't to hurt him or insult him or tell him how dumb he is or call him incompetent, even though I did call him incompetent last night. My intention wasn't to do any of that initially. But when he insisted on acting like a complete ass then yeah, I had to, like I said, I had to call in the airstrike. So uh, let me introduce this topic in the following manner. For those of you who think this is completely irrelevant, and I'm hoping that you don't think it's completely irrelevant, but I realize that some of you may. So eventually I think I'm gonna draw out a few things, maybe. But let me just start drawing a few things out, and then I'll see if it's of any use later. But like I said, I'm doing this spontaneously. I still want it to be reasonably, useful and complete. So at this point, I'm going to draw out a few things. Oh, right. So let me start with this. What I wanted to start out with right now, and this is what I started with last night in video number 2, which again, you may never see because I'm trying to provide a summary of that right now. So my question to you is, who in your family from a young age taught you how to deal with conflict? Not simply deal with conflict. I shouldn't maybe deal with implies a certain attitude or something. Perhaps negotiate would be more reasonable. Negotiate conflict, like with friends and family. So, dealing with conflict with friends and family is one thing. So who in your family taught you how to negotiate conflict with friends and family? And of course, I would want that to qualify with certain criteria, of course, not simply by example, even though examples, of course, are important. But did you learn a specific strategy or technique? Those are the types of things that I prefer, and kind of across the board. So, even if I'm doing carpentry, I have in my mind a structure for that. So all carpentry and all construction has at least 3 layers, right? You've got the structural part, you've got the cosmetic part, and then you've got the detailed part. So let's say I'm building a table, and I build the table. The table obviously has to have a structure, but I also have to think about, what is the strength of the structure for whatever the use of that particular piece of furniture might be. So I go from structure to cosmetic, what do I want it to look like, and then to details. How do I want to hyper detail it? So let's say I build a table, which obviously I have done many times, and patios and decks and chairs and whatever else. But let's say I'm building a table. I want it to have a certain gross form that you would see from across the room. And then as you get closer to that table, you would see other levels of detail. Of course, the structure indicates, part of the function. Does it have layers? How strong is it, etc.? And then on top of that, we would go to then details. Did I use finishing nails? Did I use screws? Did I use dowels? Did I use glue? What's the finish? Is it a matte finish or a glossy finish? Things like that. So everything has a structure, whether you know that, whether you know it, or whether you don't know it, or whether you know it intuitively, which means you know it, but you don't know it. So in a lot of things, obviously not with everything, like romantic relationships, I don't think those need to have a structure. You just kind of go with the flow as long as it's flowing. But if you get to the point where you have to have some level of conflict resolution, maybe you would benefit from having a structure. In a lot of things, I like structure. You've seen structure in my books. You've seen the flow diagrams. You've seen the image on the cover of the book is a pathophysiologic flow from the 7 main contributors to chronic inflammation and metabolic disease. The 7 main contributors flow into, metabolic and inflammatory dysfunction, and then that leads to disease manifestations. So those of you who are familiar with my work, especially, it continues in this direction, but I'm getting more structured as I continue to develop my work. So again, who taught you how to deal with conflict with friends and family? I can tell you who taught me, and that's nobody. My mom was pretty diplomatic. My stepfather was a typical Texas man who was a hunter, fisher, mechanical engineer, provider, but he wasn't, a diplomat. I'm sure he hired and fired his employees with whatever level of success was reasonable. But since he was the owner of the company, he could do whatever he wanted. So people who are owners of companies aren't necessarily good at what they do, but they do have a position of power that enables them and obligates them to do certain things. That doesn't mean they're good at it. Believe me, I've seen plenty of business owners who suck at their jobs and their businesses just survive because they're in a good niche, because they're well connected, because they have government contracts, because they're popular with a certain group of people, whatever. It doesn't mean they're good at what they do. It just means they're successful at what they do. Being good and being successful are not always the same. Even though, of course, most people who are, making money are going to say, oh, it's because I'm so good at my job. Anyway, let's go back to this. So again, who in your family taught you this stuff? That's up to you. I can tell you in my family, nobody taught me anything. My dad was a very successful businessman, taught me nothing about business. My stepfather, who was in my life until about age 12, my age 12, taught me a lot of things about hunting and fishing and construction, but didn't teach me anything about business, of course. My uncle was a successful architect, never taught me anything about business, other than the fact that he admitted that he stole from his clients. Grandfather, I had one really good grandfather named James Harrison McCardle. He died when I was very young, even before he died, he taught me a few things, but not about business. My other grandfather was kind of a social dropout. He fought in World War II in the Navy, and then apparently lived off of his Navy pension for the rest of his life and didn't do anything. So I can tell, like I said, I'm just being transparent about this, but nobody taught me anything about this. My other question, which I just formulated last night, is obviously very similar to the first one, and that is, who in your family taught you how to deal with conflicts in business? So dealing with conflicts and contracts in business is obviously different. In romantic and family and friendship relationships, you're just going with the flow, but everything is going to be verbal. In business, everything's going to be written down. So a guy can tell you, oh yeah, we provide excellent service, we do this, we're Johnny on the spot, we've got staff and faculty within our law firm or whatever. Go ahead and sign this contract and we'll get going. We'll represent you, we'll be your agent, we're going to be your best friends, we're bros. I mean, you want to know how many times I've heard that? But if it's not in the contract, it doesn't exist. So your bro who tells you that you're going to do X, Y, and Z, if it's not in the contract, bro, then it doesn't exist, bro. And like I've said in other videos, one that I did spontaneously on Miami Beach in 2022, believe me, I've heard people have told me, hey, we're family. We've known each other for 20 years, 30 years, whatever. I knew your father, I knew your mother. You can count on me. You can stay at my house. I've heard all that bullshit. And then they give me a contract that screws me out of big money. So you have to, of course, take contracts very seriously. Number one, you have to take them seriously. Number two, the way to take them seriously is to hire an attorney to have the attorney review it. They'll pick up on things that you'll never pick up on, especially if it's in a different language that's not your native language. And number three, like I've said in other videos recently over the last couple of years, never sign a contract the first time it's given to you. That's one of my rules that I've had to develop. Because whoever wrote the contract, they wrote it for themselves. So if there's any wiggle room, it's going to be to their advantage. If the contract contains restrictions, it's going to restrict you. It's not going to restrict them. They wrote the contract. They wrote it for themselves. And I've also noticed that within the United States, over the last couple of years, since we came back to the US from Spain, I've noticed that a lot of businesses are just fake businesses now. They promise the world, you sign the contract, you pay the money, and they don't even do the job. And then they bill you for it. I've had that happen now 3 times since coming back to the US. I never had that happen before, but apparently that's the new strategy. And it's just because, the cost of living in the US has gone up. People are desperate for money. And yeah, if they can rob somebody legally, then that's what they do. So again, you have to look at the contract the best you can. My advice is to get an attorney to read it on your behalf, but always be ready to implement some type of change. That tells the other person that you're not just an idiot signing contracts without looking at them. Not that you would always be an idiot. I mean, we've all signed contracts without reading them. But you look at it, your attorney looks at it, but expect to implement some changes. That's one of the things I've learned. Unless it's a beautiful contract, then you have to say, hey, it looks great, but we have to change something. I need to know that if we agree and I pay you, that I get delivery on these goods, not at your convenience, but within 6 months or 6 weeks, something like that. Like I've said before, a contract is going to be your relationship with that person or your financial future, depending on the nature of the contract, or both. So this is real deal. I mean, this is real life. You have to take care of yourself by committing yourself to something that works for you, not something that works for somebody else. I did sign a contract earlier this year that was a beautiful contract. I'll give you 2 contrasting examples. I signed a contract earlier this year with a group. I think they're up near Chicago or something, like Michigan, something like that. And the contract states, they signed it, they wrote it, I signed it. But like I said, it was a beautiful contract. They said, we promise to deliver X by this date, and you will be happy with it, and it will perform. Our metric for our work is X. It was a very clear contract, but actually written to the benefit of them in certain ways, but also for the client. It says, we promise that we will deliver X by X date, and that's our commitment. That's a pretty damn good contract. Another contract was offered to me, another legal contract, and the guy said, when you sign this, you agree to pay our fee, which was like $1,400 an hour, even if we have to consult with our colleagues in London. And this was a legal deal in the United States. So what the hell do they need to talk with their friends in London for? I'm not paying for that. So if I had signed that contract, then legally I would be bound to pay for this clown to, chat with his friends in London. Hey, how was your weekend? Oh yeah, things are X, Y, and Z. Or hey, I'm going to go to London and I'm going to have lunch with my friend and I'm going to bill somebody for it. That was just totally stupid. Again, this was a legal contract specific to laws within the United States, but their contract gave them a clause where they could, go or chat with people in London about our deal. It's just stupid. So obviously I didn't even reply to that. So who in your family taught you how to deal with this stuff? Probably nobody. Or maybe you're lucky. Dealing with friends and family. Who taught you how to deal with business stuff? And I'll add another one here. In your formal education, what did you learn about dealing with contracts, attorneys, non-disclosure agreements, all that kind of stuff, right? So if you weren't taught from a young age how to negotiate this kind of territory, I'm willing to bet that you are unprepared to deal with some of this stuff, just like I have been for a lot of my life. And it never ends. I don't know. Maybe at this point in my life, I'm actually developing some level of skill at it. But I certainly didn't have any skill earlier in my life. When I was living in Seattle in 1996, just to be precise. Yeah, 1996. I was living on Aurora Avenue. At that time in my life, so I was 25 years old then, if that's all correct. Around that time, so I had already found mentors in my life in other areas, but at that time in my life, I realized that I was going to get my ass kicked by the world if I didn't learn how to negotiate people. And so at that time, I accessed two works. I think one was an audio cassette for sure, but the other one I think was an audio cassette and a book. One of which was written by Jerry Spence. I don't know if it's Jerry or maybe it's a G. I think it's a G. Jerry Spence, who was an attorney, apparently of some acclaim. And the title of his book was How to Argue and Win Every Time. Again, How to Argue and Win Every Time. Really good book. Gave me some insights. Another audio cassette, which was kind of fun and creative, was called either How to Deal with Difficult People or Dealing with Difficult People. I think it was How to Deal with Difficult People. It was done by two naturopaths, actually, naturopathic physicians, one of whom has been an acquaintance of mine for many years. And as I recall, his name was Nick. We're not like buddies or anything, but I do know him. Nick Kirschner, something like that. I'll look it up and I'll put it in the video. Anyway, How to Deal with Difficult People was very good. How to Argue and Win Every Time was also important. And then, of course, I've obviously accessed quite a bit of psychology and philosophy. And I want to include a little bit of that philosophy in this right now. Because I thought of this, and I still think this is important. Nietzsche, Nitzsche, in his book Zarathustra, and in other works as well, he talks about something that he refers to as the spirit of revenge. And this is a good topic because then I can draw something out, and this will segue into something that's practical. Actually, maybe this is the conclusion, but let's see how it plays out. And you'll see this a little bit also in the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. You'll see this in mainstream religion as well. All of those paradigms, Nietzsche, Stoicism, so-called Stoicism, like I don't really consider Marcus Aurelius to be a Stoic. I realize that's the popular interpretation of his work. I think that's a complete misinterpretation. But maybe I'll talk about that some other day. So we've got Nietzsche, we've got, what do we have? We have Stoicism, like real Stoicism, and then you've got like the major religions. And all of those paradigms teach against revenge, but they do so for different reasons. I think that religions try to teach against revenge because they're mostly, in my opinion, political tools that are designed to protect the ruling class. So they want to teach the population to not seek revenge and to turn the other cheek, so that the religious masses of people won't rise up against the ruling class. I mean, I can interpret it that way. You could too, but obviously religions serve a function in the world, and that is to control and kind of pacify society. From a Stoic perspective, I think they would say, don't seek revenge because you're just wasting energy and wasting time, and it doesn't really provide any value. So just kind of move on with your life. Oh, and they're all about, not having emotions and all that kind of stuff. That's a big part of popular Stoicism. But from a Nietzschean perspective, he would say this, which I happen to agree with more than the other approaches. Nietzsche would say, anytime, he would say this about pity as well. So Nietzsche was anti-pity for the same reason that he was so I'm going to put anti-pity and anti-revenge. And he was anti-pity and anti-revenge for the same ultimate reasons, the most clear of which is when you have pity for someone and when you want revenge on someone else, you are simply adding to the misery of the world, including your own. Even though it feels like power, it's a pathetic form of power to seek revenge. If somebody pissed you off, your best approach is to just move on. And so that's why I didn't want to argue with this guy who I'm, talking about in the background here. Same thing with pity. When you feel sorry for someone, and I'm not really strict on this because obviously I feel pity for people, but I try to look at it from this perspective as well. Like if you see somebody who's sick or injured or somebody who's been betrayed, your pity for them doesn't help the situation. It sure as hell doesn't help you, because now you're feeling miserable, or I'm feeling miserable because someone else is miserable. That's only adding to the misery of the world, and that's not the goal. Now, what does matter is what we do with that. So let's say someone's injured, or they've been hit by a car, or they suffered some calamity. I might feel that pity, but the pity itself should not be the stopping point. Do something about it. If you feel pity for someone, then go help them get up, or help them with their hospital bills, or build a school so those poor kids that don't have shoes can at least advance and then maybe get careers later. But pity as an emotion only makes a second person miserable because someone else is miserable. It doesn't do anything. So exchanging pity for some type of action is a lot more reasonable. So, I don't think Nietzsche certainly wasn't anti-feeling, but he was anti kind of feelings that don't do anything. And the one that he hated the most, of course, was pity. He also said that pity just makes people feel ineffective. So a lot of times people feel sorry, or, oh, I'm so sorry that this happened to you. But unless you can convert that compassion and care into action, then you're stuck feeling not only sad or depressed for someone else, but also powerless. So again, pity doesn't help. It doesn't help the other person necessarily. It certainly doesn't help the second person. But if you can feel it and say, oh, God, that sucks. It sucks for them. And I'm going to do something about it. And that's a much more effective way to live. Not just simply drowning in emotion, but actually saying, oh, I feel that. I'm not going to stay stuck in that feeling. I'm going to turn it into something that actually matters. Revenge has a similar structure to it in that it has two components. If someone has wronged you, or if someone has wronged me, in this case, dealing with this jackass that I've had to deal with for the last couple of years, what I'm trying not to do is try to seek revenge on him. Again, number one, that's just adding to the misery of the world, and that's not my mission in life. My mission in life is not to, rain on someone else's parade, even though I might not care for their particular parade. Let them live in their fantasy world or whatever. I don't care. Like I said also before, in a lot of adult level conflicts, unless you are higher in the hierarchy than they are, where they have to pay attention to what you say, then they're not going to pay attention to what you say. And so the idea that you're going to criticize them or point out their errors, and then they're going to learn from that, that is not happening. Or very rarely does that happen. When it does happen, it can be good, but that depends on the recipient. Like in my case, I remember very clearly about 15 or 13 years ago, I did a conference in Chicago, and the organizer of the conference was a good friend of mine at the time. And I did a good job of the conference. I taught good material, I presented it well, I engaged with the audience, basic stuff like that. But there were a few details in the conference that I did not organize well. And this guy, my friend in Chicago who was organizing the conference, he was very meticulous. And at the end of the conference, it was a 2-day conference, he called me out and he said, you did this wrong. And he said, you're a great teacher and you have great material, but you're not managing the details that also matter, and you need to up your game. And so, yeah, in a sense, he was calling me out, but I valued him and I valued that experience. But that's not the norm. Most people aren't going to give, and a lot of dynamics are such that the person doesn't give good advice, and the other person, even if they did give good advice from this side, the other person has too much, ego boundary to receive the feedback. So don't think that it's going to be a teaching moment, because it's probably not. The other thing about revenge is, from a Nietzschean perspective, Nietzsche would say that when you seek revenge, you are simply reinforcing. It's a little sloppy with the handwriting because I'm getting pretty hungry right now. I haven't eaten breakfast. You are simply reinforcing your own victimization. So, and he would call that slave morality. As opposed to master morality. So, again, Nietzsche, in his different works, but also in Zarathustra, I believe, is anti-revenge, because he says if you're seeking revenge, in that act, you are reinforcing the image that you have of yourself as the victim, or as the person who got screwed over, or whatever. So the very act of seeking revenge, even though it might feel powerful in the moment, you're actually reinforcing your own self-image as the victim. So here I'm going to change directions now. So here I've been anti-revenge because you're just adding, the process of revenge is just adding more misery to the world. That's not the goal. Here I'm saying don't seek revenge because the other person's they're not going to learn. Number 3, reinforcing victimization. You're reinforcing the image you have of yourself, or I would be reinforcing the image I have of myself as the victim if I'm trying to, seek revenge. On the other hand, it's not really revenge necessarily, even though it could look like that. So here I'm anti-revenge, anti-revenge, anti-revenge. But at some point, you may just have to call the shit out for what it is. And so, like with this guy, who I've had this legal dynamic with for the last couple of years, I'm the client. He's supposed to be the professional in this realm. Therefore, he is responsible for managing and directing this project. And he has screwed it up at every possible opportunity. I'll give you 2 examples. Last year, in the middle or end of December, I was with my wife in a cafe, and I get an email from this guy saying, we have to take action on this account now. We have to do this. We have to do this. None of this was an emergency. At least shouldn't have been. But again, we're at the latter half of December, and I'm sitting in a cafe with obviously my day planned. And this guy says, you got to call the office immediately. So first of all, it's late December. Second of all, he says, we have to act on this now. Third of all, he says, you have to call the office. Well, guess what? Late December, I'm not in the mood to handle some legal fake emergency, number 1. Number 2, he's the professional in this dynamic, and he should have anticipated that this was going to happen. This is not a surprise. So it's a failure of appropriate planning on his part. Third part, like I already said, is he said, you got to call the office. Well, guess what? Obviously, we're in different time zones and whatever else. And when I called his office, he wasn't even in the office. So we left the cafe. We had to go run another errand. I was sitting in the car. I called him from the car. And his secretary or assistant or whoever works in his office says, oh, well, he's not even in the office. So that was part number 4, I guess. So late December, urgency, late December doesn't work for business. Immediate urgency also doesn't work. Saying I got to call his office doesn't work. Him not being there when I called the office is worse. And then, I sent him a message. I said, look, you are, And he always copies like half of his office, so I copied him back. If he's gonna state it publicly, then we're gonna manage it publicly. So I said, look, you're totally unorganized and totally unprofessional in this regard, and this is just stupid. You know, I am the client, you are supposed to be the professional, and this is just bullshit service. And one of his replies to me, which I read on my phone, was a screenshot of a government website that had like the rules that we're supposed to follow or something like that. I mean, it was so poorly done, I could barely even read it or not read it on my phone. So that was number 5. If I'm paying a professional service, he better damn well not send me a screenshot of a government website for me to then interpret. If I'm paying him for his work, then he needs to provide that work. So that was 5 big fuck ups. But because we had a contract that stated I have to pay him for his work, I'm the one who ends up paying for this guy to be a slob. So that's what happened in December. And then this year, things just kept getting worse to the point where I was thinking, I don't know if this guy had some, brain injury, or I don't know what happened to this guy, but I never knew him very well, but I could see his work clearly deteriorating. Or maybe this was just the way it's always been. I don't know, but it was just horrible. So as I reviewed in a previous video, he emailed me saying, look, we have to take action on this within 24 hours. This was another crisis, which is absurd. So he sends me an email saying, we have to act on this within 24 hours. If we don't hear back from you, we will assume that you're not interested. Well, at that point, I wasn't interested. I was like, I had already found another attorney to take care of this. So I just let it go. Remember what I said before in other videos, but also kind of implied here. The goal is not revenge at any point in time. The goal is freedom and be happy. So I interpreted his email as saying, because he said, we've got 24 hours or we're dead in the water, I was like, fine, let it die a peaceful death. But then he had the gall and the hubris to send me another email day before yesterday, after this thing supposedly had died out. And he said, I'm surprised you let this die out. We were working on this for you. And so at that point, I couldn't be passive anymore, and I had to call it out. So like I said, don't seek revenge. Don't try to teach anybody anything. But at some point in time, you may, and this is one of the major points of today's video. You want, I want, we should want, you want peace, separation, or more accurately, it's not separation necessarily, but freedom. I don't want to be tangled up with this guy. I don't want to be kind of gummed up in this sticky emotional residue. I don't know if this guy's just lonely and he keeps fucking up this job so that he has like contact with the world. I don't know what the hell the deal is. But at this point, it's just absurd. What we want, what we should want, is peace, freedom, and mental clarity. Because with mental clarity and not having someone, gum up your mental machinery, you can do whatever you want. You can travel, you can learn another language, you can play piano, or in my case, I used to play a little bit of guitar. But these are the things that we want because this enables us to live, the life that we want. What I don't want is a big entanglement with this guy or anybody else. Entangle. Or to be, taken advantage of. So I don't know what to call that. Maybe I'll call it robbery. So someone's either robbing your time, or they're robbing your attention, or they're robbing your money, whether that's cash or ideas or physical goods, But I don't want to be entangled. I mean, I want to be here with peace and freedom. I don't want to be here entangled with some quagmire of emotional residue and logistical bullshit. So like I said with this guy, I was ignoring him. I was ignoring him. I was ignoring him. I was ignoring him. And then he sent me two really stupid emails. He was unable to advance the project. So I sent him some documents and some suggestions saying, hey, maybe we could try this approach. And then he wrote me back, and he always sends me these one-line emails. And he says, I don't know if you're asking a question here. Well, why don't you read my damn email and you'll know if I'm asking a question or not. And it'll be obvious to you if I'm asking a question or not. And no, it's not a question. I'm offering suggestions with documentation for a possible route for a successful outcome on this project, because for the past 3.5 years, this guy has fucked up this project. So his reply to me was, I don't know if you're asking a question. At that point, I knew this guy was just disconnected from reality. And then he replied to me saying, hey, I'm surprised you didn't want to move forward with this job. Okay, so now I'm trying to let this thing die a peaceful death here. Now he's pushing me a little bit more, like as if it's unclear or whatever. I mean, this guy lives in a lack of clarity, but I don't want to get rained on every interaction with his lack of clarity. So at this point, I obviously have to be more clear with him, and I have to burn this bridge. He's not getting the point that he's fucking this thing up, so I have to tell him that he's fucked it up. Again, I'm not doing that because I'm seeking revenge. I'm not trying to make him miserable. I'm not trying to teach him anything. I'm not trying to reinforce myself as the victim. But at this point, some level of confrontation is justified. Because I'm clear that I need to separate from him, and I'm also clear that I don't want him to keep billing me. If I don't set a very clear, explicit, written boundary, he's going to say, hey, we're here for you. We've been here for you. We're working on this case for you, and we're going to bill you for it. So at this point, even though this thing should have died a clean death, he keeps pushing the issue, ignoring his errors, and then it got even worse. So I did send him an email, I believe Monday, and I recorded it, but I'm giving you the summary right now. I did burn the bridge on Monday. And I said, look, you've been really unprofessional, unorganized. You have failed many times at this job. I'm not going to keep paying for this job. We're done. Have a good life. I think I actually said to him, oh, no. So it had 2 paragraphs. The second paragraph was only 1 sentence. But in the first paragraph was 3 sentences outlining how he had screwed this up. The second sentence, which was the second paragraph was, thanks for your success on other projects. Either provide those deliverables, or I anticipate that you will provide them when I ask for them, because you have been paid in full for those jobs. So that was as clean as I could make it. I had to burn the bridge, but I also knew that he had access to some other of my resources. So I was basically saying, you've been paid for that. You will provide what you've been paid for, either now or in the future. So that was done. We were done at that point. Well, last night, he emails me and says, I don't know what you're talking about. We're way past done on this. We should have been done here. We should have been more done here. And then now he wants to play the victim and say that he did everything right, even though he's obviously failed at this for 3 years. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in this conversation. This job should have taken a year at the most, 6 months. So the fact that we're even talking about it 3 years later means he has failed at the job. So I tried to be nice at least twice, and then I had to be clear and firm. And at this point, the guy's just acting like an imbecile, so I had to call in the airstrike. So I thought we had already burnt the bridge, but apparently he wanted to rebuild it and then cross back over and talk to me more, and that's just, we can't do that. We're done. So that's what happened last night. And then So I called him out and I said, you're being unprofessional and incompetent in every regard. Telling me, his replies to me were, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you're either drunk or stupid, okay? You can't say you don't know what we're talking about after we've been on this job for 3.5 years and we've done other jobs and you're an attorney and this is your specialty. You can't tell me in any way, shape, or form that you don't know what I'm talking about. And his other reply to a previous response that I had given him, which contained ideas and documentation, he said, I don't know if you're asking a question. Okay, well, you're checked out. I don't know what happened to your brain. I don't know what happened in your life. I don't care, but you're not performing as a professional. And I told him that last night. And then he replied again, and I didn't even read it. I just archived it. I'll look at it later, but I don't care. I never want to talk to this guy. I don't want to see his emails. I sure as hell don't want to get a bill from him. If he bills me again, then I'll countersue him. I've got attorneys obviously in the United States. And, I have to look at, sometimes it's just better to pay and be done with it, because in those situations, you're going to pay with time and money and energy, or just pay the $500 or whatever he's asking for and just say, screw it. Sometimes, and the first time I ever taught this, I taught it to my wife, actually. But what I taught her spontaneously at that time was, I said, sometimes you have to pay for your freedom. You don't want to do it. It sucks. It's not just. It's criminal. And sometimes you have to pay to get out of situations. So at that time, she had quit. This is really screwed up. She had quit her job. But in order to formally quit her job, she actually had to pay some type of fee or penalty or something like that they had put in her name. It was totally stupid. But again, in order to get clear and clean from her previous employer, she actually had to pay to get away from them. It was just stupid. It was kind of a subcontract, sub-employee kind of thing. And yeah, she was upset about it. And I said, look, you're paying for your freedom. You're going to pay. And after you pay this money, you will be free from these idiots. So whatever. But again, here's my structured approach. Be nice to the point where it hurts. It's like for me, I was brutally uncomfortable being nice to this guy for so long. And I had to realize some things about myself in that process, that I had some, learned helplessness around this dynamic, and I had to get clear on that. So, and I did that work. So be nice until you just can't take it anymore. Then be clear and firm. No, nothing is uncertain at this point. And then if they want to keep rehashing and remeshing this thing and entangling you or entangling me with all this emotional residue, then you got to call in the airstrike. And so that's what I did last night. I can't imagine. I mean, he should have, at this point in the game, what he should have done is send me an apology. He should have said to me, I'm sorry you're not happy with our services. We've obviously not been efficient and successful with this. We'll give you a refund on your last payment. Something like that would have been completely appropriate. And I'm not asking for the red carpet here. That would have been professional. If he is the professional and I am the client, doesn't matter if I've got 3 doctorate degrees or whatever. In this interaction, he's the professional, I'm the client. His job is to succeed at the task, in a timely manner with some cost efficiency. And to communicate that strategy clearly. In this case, he has failed at every one of these steps. He hasn't succeeded. None of this, this has taken 3 years. It should have been 6 months or 1 year at the most. It's cost me a lot of money, and he has failed to communicate what the strategy is. And then he changes the strategy, and then he charges me for changing the strategy. And his strategy was just stupid anyway. And it cost me, outside of this dynamic, I had to spend more money to complete his so-called strategy. The whole thing was just stupid. It cost me, that was another several $100s that this guy wasted. So in the process of processing these ideas a few weeks ago, I drew out an algorithm flowchart, and I'll put that on I'll put it in the video, and I'll put it on the page where I post this. And it is this. It is exactly this. Be nice, be nice, be nice. You're not trying to entangle them. See, part of this revenge thing, you're not simply adding to the misery of the world. You're not simply going to fail in your attempt to teach them something. You're not simply reinforcing your own victimization, but you're also inviting a countermeasure. So let me try to write that out. I already put number 4 down there, but maybe I'll change that to number 5, at least for right now. Number 4 is, if you seek revenge on someone, whether it's legally or verbally or socially or whatever, you are inviting more entanglement. And I don't want that. I don't want anything to do with this guy. Remember what the goal is. Oh, it's down here. Your goal every day, my goal every day, has to have a foundation of peace, freedom, and clarity. If I countermeasure this guy with his emotional residue, then this thing could just keep going. I mean, I want to be done. I want to be here. I don't want this guy on my radar. So you don't want to jump to countermeasures too quickly, because it's just going to prolong the whole thing. But if the other person won't let go of it, like a pit bull on a bone or whatever, if you burn the bridge, like in this case, I burnt the bridge has been burnt. He's trying to rebuild it. And like I said, I don't know what this guy's problem is. Maybe he's lonely, or he wants to be the victim, or what. I think that's part of it, but whatever. He's trying to rebuild the bridge that it doesn't matter. But that's what he did. And he said, oh, well, it's your fault because you didn't do your part. I mean, give me a break. So that's when I had to call the airstrike. So the summary of the approach here is, be nice, nice, nice. After that, be clear and firm. And after that, just tank the bitch. That was a phrase used by a contractor I hired in Fort Worth, Texas, when he was taking out the sprinkler system that we had. So I'm borrowing that phrase from him. The decision we had to make was whether to take out this defective sprinkler system. And he said, so you want me to just tank the bitch? I was like, yeah, tank the bitch. So anyway, that was it. That's where that came from. So, yeah. So, in closure, we as professionals need to implement a successful strategy in a timely manner that's cost effective and well communicated. In this guy's case, he didn't do any of that. And then he somehow turned that into blaming me for his failures, and that's just stupid. So anyway, in the business world, and everyone's a business, you're going to have to deal with this stuff just like I do, and sometimes it sucks. But that's part of being an adult. That's part of being an adult. It's part of doing real business when you have to hire attorneys and consultants and all that kind of stuff. But it's also part of being in the world that we have right now, where a lot of people, they want to be influencers, they want to be famous, they want to make a lot of money, they don't want to do a lot of work. So they do bullshit half-ass work, and then they charge a full fee for it. And then they go hang out at the beach or in a cafe or whatever, and they think of themselves as being successful when they've completely failed. And that's exactly what happened with this guy's unprofessional, ultimately incompetent, ultimately socially imbecilic behavior. So none of us like it, but that's the reality. And virtually none of us learned any of this in our families, neither how to manage friends and family, neither businesses, nor in our formal education. So that's why I spend some time sharing some of these insights with you. And the good thing about my sharing these insights and experiences with you is that you can, on the positive side, you can learn from my experience. And hopefully that'll make your own life easier later. If you totally disagree with my approach on this, then that's great too, because you're reinforcing confidence in yourself, or maybe you know better, or maybe you can send me an email and say, hey, here's how I would do it. Maybe you have a better approach. But at least I'm modeling an approach for you in case you don't have any approach whatsoever. Or like I said, if you have a better approach, maybe you'll be nice enough to let me know. But that's, I think, the mutual advantage in this. So I hope you're all doing well. I'll close this out right now and try to get it on the internet today. Like I said, I had done 2 other videos on these themes, but I'm trying to make this one cleaner and more efficient for everybody involved. Take care. Bye-bye.
Like that, motherfucker, you don't know me.